How do you do? Mr. Carl Lemley feels it would be a little unkind to present this picture without just a word of friendly warning. I think it will thrill you. It may shock you. It might even horrify you. So if any of you feel that you do not care to subject your nerves to such a strain, now is your chance to, well, we've warned you.
Thanks for your attention.
Throughout history, scary stories have been a very popular genre of storytelling. But why do we love to scare ourselves so much? One answer, provided by that mama's boy freak Freud, social catharsis. Catharsis, coming from the Greek word... I don't know how to say that. Who wrote this? What? That is a process of venting extreme emotion, especially aggression. It becomes social catharsis when this expression of emotions becomes a collective act, such as when watching a horror movie. Horror movies have provided social catharsis for audiences to release fear in a safe environment for over a century. Given this, there's an unspoken correlation between national trauma events, such as terror attacks, and both the popularity and intensity of horror movies. So, the loop goes as follows. A national trauma happens, causing filmmakers to create more intense films, and for people to seek out these more intense horror movies. Then social catharsis occurs, allowing audiences to safely express fear, causing horror to become more popular. After this, there's one last part of the timeline, the backlash. Because the progression of intensity in horror films is also influenced by national trauma, many people see these upticks of intense themes and imagery as going way too far. Some angry audience members in 1931, who misunderstood this catharsis through horror loop, wrote letters to the current-day MPAA saying,
"The author must have had a distorted mind, and I cannot understand why it was produced. I cannot speak too strongly against this picture for children."
Unwholesome and ghastly, morbid, inhuman, and pointless. In this day of high-pressure living, strained nerves, and constant excitement, it seems too bad that such pictures with a strong influence on the emotions should be allowed a showing anywhere.
In case you forgot, 1931 was truly full of high pressure and strained nerves, as it was 2 years into the Great Depression, the worst economic downturn in our nation's history. Unemployment reached 25%, and widespread poverty led to malnourishment and cramped, diseased living spaces. So while all of this was happening, the first nationally popular slew of horror movies was released, the Universal Classic monsters. Dracula, Frankenstein, the Wolfman, the Mummy, and the Invisible Man terrified audiences during the Great Depression, and were truly more intense than films past, showing morbid imagery such as graveyards and coffins, dead bodies, sexual themes, insanity, murder, and even child slaughter. Perhaps because this intense imagery created social catharsis, the dirty poors kept shelling out enough money to keep Universal alive during the Depression.
Horror is fantasy. It's escapism. There's a reason why the horror genre was born in the Depression. You know, why Universal's classic horror film, all those films were born in the Depression because people needed escape.
In 1945, the US bombed the Japanese cities of Hiroshima and Nagasaki with atomic bombs, killing over 200,000 people. Then, in 1954, Godzilla was released, a film about a large monster destroying cities that was created by, huge surprise, atomic radiation. The movie's themes are not subtextual, and the extreme trauma felt from the bombings certainly influenced the movie's production, as well as its cultural relevance and popularity. Lastly, on September 11, 2001, a terror attack killed nearly 3,000 people, traumatizing Americans and changing cinema as a whole. Prior to 9/11, horror movies were full of less gory Scream knockoffs, and movies like Silence of the Lambs shifted the focus of horror movies from slashers to more mentally engaging horror films. But, following the attacks, horror became more cynical and brutal, giving a new subgenre a name it has earned: torture porn. Many point to the original Saw, released in 2004, as the originator of the subgenre, but Saw's quick editing allowed the filmmakers to show very little actual gore. This would, of course, change with later sequels, but my finding is that 2005's Hostel is the first major torture porn movie. The Saw series would eventually become one of the most profitable horror series of all time, proving that millions of Americans gravitated towards the social catharsis torture porn provides.